Have you ever noticed that the more you awaken to the vastness of existence, the more certain people around you seem to retreat, as if your very presence has become somehow threatening to them? This is not accidental. This is not a flaw in the matrix. This is in fact one of the most reliable indicators that genuine transformation is occurring within you. The social ecology of ordinary reality has an immune system, and that immune system exists to neutralize those among us who begin to disrupt consensus reality by no longer buying into its most central illusions. When you begin to perceive beyond the veil of cultural programming, when your awareness expands beyond the narrow bandwidth that society has deemed acceptable and normal, you become something like an antibody in the social organism. And just as a biological organism will mobilize to neutralize a foreign entity, the social body will often work to isolate, to diminish, or even to completely eliminate your influence from its system. There is a phenomenon in nature that provides us with a perfect metaphor for what happens during spiritual evolution. Consider the caterpillar transforming into a butterfly. What many people don't realize about this process is that when the caterpillar enters the chrysalis, it doesn't simply grow wings while remaining a caterpillar. No, something far more radical occurs. Inside that chrysalis, the caterpillar's body actually dissolves. It liquefies into what biologists call a primordial soup, a nutrient-rich broth where specialized cells called imaginal cells begin to activate. These imaginal cells, which were always present within the caterpillar but dormant, suddenly awaken and begin to form clusters, gradually building the entirely new organism that will emerge as a butterfly. But here's the fascinating part. The caterpillar's immune system initially attacks these imaginal cells, recognizing them as foreign, as threats to its existence. The imaginal cells must survive this attack, continuing to multiply and connect with each other, until eventually they become so numerous that the caterpillar's immune system can no longer destroy them. This is exactly what happens when you begin to awaken spiritually within a society designed to keep you asleep. The loneliness of this transition can be excruciating. You find yourself sitting across from friends you've known for decades, participating in conversations that suddenly feel like elaborate theater productions, where everyone has memorized their lines and is playing their part with conviction, while you've somehow forgotten yours. You smile and nod. You try to contribute, but there's now a vast gulf between your reality and theirs. The things that once seemed so important to discuss, the dramas and concerns that occupied so much mental real estate, suddenly appear as trivial distractions from what is actually significant about being alive. And when you try to introduce topics that feel meaningful to you, you're met with blank stares, nervous laughter, or worst of all, the patronizing tolerance one might extend to a child talking about their imaginary friend. You quickly learn to compartmentalize your awareness, to maintain a socially acceptable persona, while the real you, the awakening you, remains hidden, speaking only when you encounter another traveler on the path. What makes this experience particularly challenging is that it's not something most of us are prepared for. Our culture celebrates individualism in theory, but punishes it severely in practice. We are told to be authentic, to follow our truth, to march to the beat of our own drummer. But these encouraging platitudes come with a critical unspoken caveat. Your authenticity is acceptable only insofar as it doesn't challenge the fundamental assumptions upon which our shared reality is constructed. The moment your personal evolution begins to disrupt the consensus, you discover that the support and understanding you expected to receive are suddenly withdrawn. People who claim to love you unconditionally reveal that their love was in fact deeply conditional, predicated on you remaining a recognizable and non-threatening version of yourself. Your evolution becomes something they experience not as growth, but as a kind of betrayal, as if you've violated an unspoken contract to remain familiar and predictable for their comfort. This experience of being deleted from people's lives as you evolve is not something to be feared, though it is certainly something to be prepared for. It is a natural and inevitable part of the awakening process. Just as a snake must shed its skin to grow, you must be willing to shed relationships, identities, and social positions that no longer align with your expanding awareness. This doesn't mean you should seek conflict or deliberately alienate people. It simply means recognizing that as you change at a fundamental level, your resonance with certain people, environments, and circumstances will naturally shift. Some connections will deepen and flourish in the light of your transformation, while others will wither away having served their purpose in your journey. I want to pause for a moment and ask you directly, when was the moment you realized you were growing in a way that people around you didn't understand? That instant when you felt you had crossed an invisible boundary, and suddenly the everyday conversations, the mundane concerns, the values that everyone takes for granted, began to seem like a theatrical play in which you could no longer participate with the same conviction. I know this experience can be profoundly lonely. You look at your friends, your family, your colleagues, and realize you're seeing layers of reality that they simply don't perceive. And the most difficult part isn't their incomprehension, but the silence you must maintain to avoid being judged, labeled, or worse yet, to prevent them from feeling inadequate or threatened by your transformation. I want you to know that your experience matters, that your journey, even when solitary, is creating ripples in the field of consciousness that affect everyone around you, even if in imperceptible ways. And that's why I'd like to invite you to share a fragment of your experience in the comments below. You can simply copy this phrase and complete it. I realized I was awakening when trustir. By doing this, you not only validate your own experience, but you also extend a hand to someone else who might be watching this video feeling like they're the only one in the world going through this. Your comment might be exactly the confirmation someone needs to continue on their journey, to know they're not going crazy, that they're not alone. This silent community of awakened people spread throughout the world strengthens every time we recognize each other, like distant lights in the darkness, which when seen together form a constellation of expanded consciousness. Now let's continue our exploration of what happens when you begin to grow beyond the limitations that once defined your reality. The paradox of spiritual evolution is that while it appears to separate you from others, its ultimate purpose is to connect you more deeply with everything that exists. As your identification with your small self, your ego, begins to loosen, you simultaneously expand into a more universal awareness that recognizes the fundamental interconnectedness of all life. What looks like isolation from one perspective is actually an invitation to a more authentic and profound form of communion from another. You're not being removed from the web of relationship. You're being asked to participate in it at a more fundamental level, one that transcends the superficial connections based on shared beliefs, mutual interests, or social convenience. The relationships that fall away are making space for connections that reflect your true nature, not the conditioned identity you've been performing. There's another fascinating paradox inherent in this process. As you become more authentically yourself, more aligned with your essence rather than your social conditioning, you simultaneously become less of a separate self in the conventional sense. The boundaries between you and the world begin to dissolve. You start to recognize yourself in others, in nature, in everything you encounter. This is not a metaphorical recognition, but a direct experiential reality. The same consciousness that animates you animates the entire universe, merely expressing itself through different forms. When this understanding moves from intellectual concept to lived experience, it transforms how you relate to everything. The pain of separation begins to be replaced by the joy of recognition. Even in conflict or misunderstanding with others, there remains an underlying awareness of the shared consciousness that connects you. Many spiritual traditions speak about the death of the ego, but this terminology can be misleading. What's actually occurring is not an annihilation of the individual self, but a profound reorganization of identity. The ego doesn't disappear. It simply assumes its proper role as an instrument rather than the master. It becomes a tool for navigating the material world rather than the entirety of who you believe yourself to be. This shift is what causes such confusion and discomfort in your social relationships. The people in your life have been relating to your ego structure, the personality they've come to know and expect certain behaviors from. When that structure begins to become more transparent, more permeable, they sense the change, even if they can't articulate it. What they're actually encountering is more of your essence, your true nature, and less of your persona. This is disorienting for them because it disrupts the unspoken agreements upon which your relationship has been built. One of the most painful aspects of this journey is watching people you love choose to walk away rather than adapt to the new frequency you're embodying. It's important to understand that this is rarely a conscious choice on their part. Few people would explicitly think, "This person is evolving spiritually and I find that threatening, so I'm going to distance myself." The process is usually much more subtle and unconscious. They simply find themselves feeling uncomfortable around you, maybe even irritable or anxious without knowing why. The new energy you're embodying is triggering their own unresolved material, reflecting back to them the choices they haven't made, the awareness they've been avoiding, the growth they've been postponing. Without realizing it, they begin to associate these uncomfortable feelings with your presence and naturally begin to avoid situations that provoke such feelings. There's a concept in biology called evolutionary pressure, which refers to the forces that drive adaptation and change in species over time. Social systems exert a similar kind of pressure, but in the opposite direction. While biological evolution pushes toward greater complexity and adaptation, Social systems often exert pressure toward conformity and stasis. The more you evolve beyond the parameters of what your social environment can comfortably accommodate, the more pressure you'll feel to regress back to a previous state of awareness. This pressure can take many forms. Concerned comments from family members who notice you're not as interested in things that used to excite you, friends who become increasingly insistent that you join them in activities that no longer resonate with you, subtle or not so subtle implications that you've become pretentious, delusional, or have joined some kind of cult. These are all manifestations of the social immune system attempting to neutralize the threat you represent to the collective illusion. So how do you navigate this challenging territory without either compromising your growth or unnecessarily alienating the people you care about? First, it's essential to develop compassion for those who cannot yet see what you're beginning to see. Remember that everyone is at exactly the stage of their journey they need to be. The fact that you're awakening more rapidly doesn't make you superior. It simply means you're playing a different role in the collective evolution of consciousness. Each person's timing is perfect for their unique path. Second, learn to translate your insights into language that can be received by people at different levels of awareness. This doesn't mean diluting your truth, but rather finding bridges between your understanding and theirs. Look for points of resonance rather than focusing on the differences. Third, find community with others who are undergoing similar transformations. This is crucial for maintaining your sanity and continuing your growth. While spiritual evolution is ultimately a deeply personal journey, having companions along the way provides validation, support, and the opportunity to articulate and refine your evolving understanding. The isolation that comes with awakening serves another important purpose, beyond simply clearing away relationships that no longer serve your highest development. It creates space, a kind of fertile void in which new aspects of yourself can emerge and be integrated. In the absence of constant social reinforcement for your old identity, you have the opportunity to discover who you actually are beyond the roles you've been playing. This is precious time, though it rarely feels that way when you're in the middle of it. The discomfort of loneliness is actually the sensation of your energy reorganizing itself, of your consciousness expanding beyond its familiar boundaries. If you can resist the temptation to immediately fill this space with new relationships or distractions, it becomes an incubator for profound transformation. There's an old shamanic understanding that initiation always involves a form of dismemberment, a breaking apart of the old self, so that a more integrated and powerful self can be born. In traditional cultures, this process was guided and contained within ritual structures that provided a container for the intense energies of transformation. In our modern world, we largely lack these containers, which is why awakening can feel so chaotic and disorienting. Without maps for the territory you're entering or elders who have walked the path before you, you're left to navigate by intuition and whatever wisdom teachings you can find that speak to your experience. This is both the challenge and the opportunity of awakening in our time. You're not just undertaking a personal journey of transformation, you're participating in the creation of new patterns and pathways for collective evolution. As you continue to evolve, you'll discover something remarkable. The very qualities that caused you to be rejected or misunderstood in some circles become precisely what draw new people and opportunities to you. Your increasing authenticity, your willingness to speak truth even when it's uncomfortable, your expanded perspective and deeper presence, these become like beacons that attract others who are ready for what you have to offer. The space created by those who left your life begins to fill with connections that are aligned with your new frequency. These relationships have a different quality than the ones they replace. They're based on recognition of essence rather than surface compatibility, on shared commitment to growth rather than mutual reinforcement of limitations. They have a depth and resilience that weren't possible within the constraints of your former awareness. The universe operates according to a principle of resonance. Everything vibrates at particular frequencies, and things that vibrate at compatible frequencies naturally come together, while those with discordant frequencies naturally separate. As your consciousness expands, the frequency of your energy field changes. This isn't mystical speculation, it's physics. Consciousness has measurable effects on physical reality, including your body, your brain chemistry, and the electromagnetic field you generate. As these changes occur, you naturally begin to resonate with different people, environments, and experiences than you did before. What feels like rejection is actually a realignment, a reorganization of your external reality to match your internal evolution. Trust this process. Trust that as certain doors close, others are opening, leading you toward circumstances that better reflect and support who you are becoming. The path of awakening is not linear. It's more like a spiral, revisiting similar themes at deeper levels as you continue to evolve. The experience of being deleted from people's lives isn't something that happens once and is complete. It occurs in waves throughout the journey. Each time you undergo a significant shift in consciousness, what changes is your relationship to this experience. What initially feels like devastating rejection gradually becomes recognized as a natural and necessary aspect of growth. You learn to honor the role each person has played in your journey, to release them with gratitude when your paths diverge, and to remain open to the new connections that will inevitably form as you continue to evolve. There's a growing trust in the intelligence of the process itself, a recognition that consciousness knows exactly what it's doing as it unfolds through your unique life experience. As we bring these reflections to a close, I want to leave you with this understanding. The pain of being misunderstood, rejected, or forgotten by those who once seemed central to your life is real, and it deserves to be honored. Allow yourself to grieve these losses fully. At the same time, recognize that what's happening is not a mistake or a punishment, but a necessary reconfiguration of your social reality to align with your expanding consciousness. The people who can no longer see you clearly are not villains in your story. They're simply characters whose role was to accompany you through a particular chapter that has now concluded. The next chapter of your journey calls for different companions, different challenges, different opportunities for growth. Trust the process, trust your growth, and trust that life, in its infinite intelligence, is guiding you exactly where you need to go. The relationships that are meant to evolve with you will find a way to do so, even if that requires periods of separation or reconfiguration. Those that cannot will fall away with increasing ease as you learn to hold all connections with a lighter touch, appreciating them for what they are in the moment without expectation or attachment. What emerges from this process of letting go is a profound freedom to be fully yourself in every interaction, to offer your gifts without apology, and to receive the gifts of others without trying to make them into something they're not. In this space of authentic relationship, true communion becomes possible, not despite your differences, but precisely because those differences are held within a larger field of shared awareness. If these reflections on spiritual awakening and the inevitable social adjustments that accompany it have touched something within you, know that you are not alone on this journey. This path of consciousness expansion can seem isolating when those around you don't understand the transformations you're experiencing. It's precisely for this reason that we've created this safe space, this refuge for seekers like you. By subscribing to the channel, you become part of a silent community of people who, like you, are navigating between two worlds, the conventional and the expansive. Each new video we share is like a beacon in the fog, illuminating a bit more of the path ahead, offering new perspectives on how to integrate your mystical experiences into everyday life without losing your authenticity. We're not here to offer easy answers or empty promises of instant enlightenment. We're here to walk together, to explore the mysteries of consciousness with honesty and depth, to validate your experience when the world around you cannot understand it. If you feel you're growing in ways that others around you are not, if you perceive realities that go unnoticed by most, this channel is your sanctuary. Subscribe and allow yourself to be nourished by reflections that recognize both the beauty and the challenge of your awakening. Together, we form an invisible web of expanding consciousnesses, each at our own pace, but connected by authentic seeking. A simple click on the subscription button is a silent whisper that says, "I too am on this path, I too am awakening." And that, in a world that often makes us feel alienated in our own expanded perception, is an invaluable treasure.